We don't serve trash here. Those 5 words, spat across a crowded bar in Boston's financial district, would expose a theft ring that had been bleeding workers dry for years. And the woman who documented every stolen dollar in a college fund envelope would become the one to burn it all down. When Nia Harper, a black waitress surviving on fumes and faith in humanity, chose kindness over self-preservation for a stranger in torn work boots, she had no idea he was the owner in disguise, or that her battered notebook of stolen tips would become the evidence that changed everything. What started as a burger accidentally would end with security footage, tearful confessions, and a question that haunts every workplace. How long does theft stay invisible when everyone's too afraid to look? Before we dive in, do me a favor, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the night it all began. The fluorescent lights of Harborside Tavern cast everything in that particular shade of exhausted that comes around 10 p.m. on a Thursday. Not late enough for the place to be empty, not early enough for anyone to still have hope in their eyes. The financial district crowd had thinned to the usual suspects, junior analysts nursing craft beers they couldn't really afford, a couple of real estate agents closing a deal over whiskey sours, and the kind of regulars who treated the scarred mahogany bar like a second living room. Nia Harper moved between tables with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd learned long ago that wasted motion meant wasted tips. 5 years at Harborside had taught her the geography of survival, which corners got ignored by management, which customers left 20% regardless of service, which smile to wear when your feet screamed and your back threatened to quit before your shift ended. Tonight was her 5th double in 6 days, and her body had stopped sending pain signals and started sending threats. She was refilling water glasses at table 7 when the door opened. The man who walked in looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts of a harder life. Work boots so worn the steel toe showed through on the left side. Jeans with permanent oil stains that no amount of washing would ever lift. A canvas jacket that had seen better decades. His face carried that particular exhaustion that comes from physical labor, not the trendy tiredness of too many emails, but the bone-deep weariness of a body used as a tool. He was maybe 40, maybe 50, maybe ageless in the way that poverty makes people. His eyes swept the room with the cautious hope of someone who knew he didn't belong but was too tired to care. He chose a stool at the far end of the bar, away from the clusters of after-work drinkers, and waited. Gavin Rios noticed him immediately. The floor manager had been working at Harborside for 3 years, and in that time he'd perfected the art of performing authority. He was 32 but dressed 45, button-down shirts always crisp, tie always precisely knotted, hair always product perfect. He moved through the restaurant like a shark through shallow water, and he'd learned that cruelty, when delivered with enough confidence, looked like professionalism. He was checking the reservation list when he spotted the man at the bar, and something in his face shifted. Hardened. This was opportunity. Gavin crossed the floor with purposeful strides, weaving between tables with the aggressive confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power he held. The bartender, Tommy, a kid barely 23 who was working his way through community college, saw Gavin coming and his shoulders tensed. "I've got this," Gavin said, loud enough to carry, loud enough to make sure people heard. The man at the bar looked up. His eyes were brown and patient and tired beyond measure. "We don't serve trash here," Gavin announced, his voice pitched for maximum humiliation. The conversations at nearby tables stuttered, heads turned. "This is a respectable establishment, for paying customers." The man didn't flinch, didn't argue, just met Gavin's eyes with something that might have been sadness or might have been long practice at being invisible. "I can pay," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like sandpaper over wood. "Just need some water and the cheapest thing you got. The fries, maybe." "The cheapest thing?" Gavin's laugh was theatrical, designed for the audience now watching from their tables. "Let me guess. You'll pay in change? Pulled from your pockets after you've been panhandling outside?" "I work construction," the man said, still quiet, still patient. "Been pulling overtime on the Seaport project. Just finished a 16-hour shift. Just need something before I catch the bus home." "Right. Construction." Gavin made air quotes, and Naya, still holding the water pitcher at table 7, felt something hot and familiar rise in her chest. Well, construction worker, I think you'd be more comfortable at one of those 24-hour diners in Dorchester. This establishment caters to a certain clientele. I'm sure you understand. The man's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough to show the words were landing. I've got money, he repeated. I'm not asking for charity, just fries and water. And I'm not asking you to leave, Gavin said smoothly. I'm telling you, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. It's posted right there. He gestured vaguely toward the entrance where a small sign did, in fact, say exactly that. Nia set down the water pitcher. She didn't decide to move. Her body just did it, carrying her across the floor before her brain could calculate the cost. She'd seen this scene play out before. Different actors, same script. The man who got told the kitchen was closed at 8:15 when it clearly wasn't. The woman told there were no tables available while 3 sat empty. The teenager told the bathroom was for customers only, even though he just ordered food. She'd watched it happen because watching was safer than intervening, because rent was due and her son Mason had a doctor's appointment next week that wasn't covered by insurance. Because jobs like this, even jobs with managers like Gavin, were still jobs, and jobs meant survival. But something about the man's patience, the way he didn't fight back, the 16-hour shift he'd mentioned, it cracked something open in her chest. I'll take his table, she said. Gavin turned. The look he gave her could have stripped paint. Excuse me? I said I'll take his table. I've got room in my section. She looked at the man, not Gavin. What can I get you? The man's eyes widened slightly, like he couldn't quite process kindness when it arrived. Nia, Gavin said, her name a warning. Fries and water, the man said, and there was something fragile in his voice now, something that might break if handled roughly. That's all. The fries are $7, Nia said. She pulled out her order pad, pen already moving. Comes with our house, aioli. You want anything else? Burgers 12, sandwiches 10. Just the fries, he said. I don't want to, I can't. No problem, Nia said. I'll put it in. She turned to walk toward the POS terminal, but Gavin's hand caught her elbow. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to stop her. Kitchen, he said. Just that one word. Nia followed him through the double doors into the bright chaos of the back of house. Line cooks worked over flames and fryers, the ventilation system roaring overhead. Carlos, the head chef, glanced up and immediately found something fascinating to focus on across the kitchen. He'd learned not to get involved. Gavin waited until they were in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and the storage room, far enough from the dining room that no one would hear, close enough to the chaos that the conversation would stay private. What the hell was that? His voice was quiet but sharp, a knife wrapped in velvet. A customer ordered food, Nia said. I took his order. That wasn't a customer. That was a problem I was handling. He wanted to pay for fries, Gavin. That's literally our job. Our job, Gavin said, stepping closer, is maintaining the standards of this establishment, creating an atmosphere that attracts the right clientele, making sure people feel comfortable spending money here. You know what makes paying customers uncomfortable? Having to sit next to someone who looks like they haven't showered in a week. He said he just worked a 16-hour shift. And I'm supposed to just believe that? Nia, come on, you're smarter than this. Gavin's voice shifted, became almost paternal. I know you want to help people. I know you've got a big heart, but you can't save everyone. And when you undermine me in front of customers, you make both of us look bad. Nia felt the familiar weight of rationalization settling over her shoulders. This was how it worked. This was how it always worked. Someone did something cruel, and then they explained so reasonably, so logically, why it wasn't actually cruel at all, why it was policy, why it was necessary, why it was somehow kind. I'm going to serve him his fries, she said. Gavin's expression hardened. Fine, but it comes out of your tips, $7. And you're cut after this table. Go home early. I think you need to remember who makes the schedule around here. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her in the hallway with the sound of sizzling oil and shouted orders and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. $7 wasn't the world. $7 was groceries. Was the copay on Mason's asthma medication? Was the difference between making rent on time or paying the late fee? Nia thought about the man at the bar, about his patient eyes, about the way he'd said, "I work construction," like he was defending his right to exist. She pushed through the doors and put in his order. Tommy slid a glass of ice water across the bar to the man, who accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you," and drank like he'd been walking through desert. Nia busied herself with her other tables. The real estate agents wanted another round. Table 7 needed their check. The regular by the window was ready for his usual turkey club. She worked with mechanical efficiency, her mind already doing the math. $7 from tonight's tips. Getting cut early meant losing 2 hours of potential earnings. Tomorrow was Friday, which was usually good, but she'd have to hope for the right customers, the right luck, the right confluence of factors that turned wages into survival. Carlos caught her eye from the kitchen window and slid a plate across the pass. "Fries up," he called. But the plate didn't just have fries. There was a burger, too. A full hamburger with lettuce, tomato, onions, the works. The kind of burger that cost $12 and came with those hand-cut fries and made the smell alone worth the price. Nia looked at Carlos. Carlos looked very carefully at the order ticket in front of him. "Kitchen made a mistake," he said, loud enough for the sous chef to hear, quiet enough that the words felt like conspiracy. "Made an extra burger. Can't serve it. Been sitting under the heat lamp too long. Has to be thrown out in about 10 minutes per health code, unless someone helps us out by eating it." Their eyes met. Carlos's face was carefully neutral, but there was something there. Solidarity, maybe. Recognition. He'd worked kitchens for 20 years and he'd seen plenty of Gavins. "Per health code," Nia repeated. "Per health code," Carlos confirmed. "After 10 minutes, it's waste, just sitting there. Shame to throw away good food." Nia picked up the plate. It was still warm. The burger was perfectly assembled, the fries golden and salted just right. She carried it to the bar. The man looked at the plate, then at her. Confusion crossed his face, followed by understanding, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. "I didn't order—" "Kitchen made a mistake," Nia said, setting it down in front of him. She kept her voice low, meant only for him. "They made an extra burger by accident. It's already paid for, comes out of the waste budget. But health code says it can't be served to customers after it sits under the heat lamp more than 10 minutes. So in about 8 minutes, I have to throw this in the trash. All of it, the whole plate." She let that sit between them. "Unless," she continued, "someone who's been working hard all day does me a favor and helps me out by eating it. Saves me a trip to the dumpster." The man stared at the burger like it might be a trap, like kindness was a language he'd forgotten how to read. "I can't," he said. "I mean, I can pay for the fries, but I can't—" "You're not paying for it," Nia said gently. "It's waste. It's already accounted for. I'm literally asking you to help me by eating food that's going in the trash otherwise. You'd be doing me a favor." His throat worked. She watched him try to find words, try to find the catch, try to understand why someone would lie about throwing away a perfectly good burger just to let him eat it. "Why?" he finally asked. Just that. Why? Nia thought about all the true answers she could give. Because Gavin is a bastard. Because I'm tired of watching people get treated like they don't matter. Because my son is 8, and I'm teaching him that kindness isn't weakness, even though the world keeps trying to prove me wrong. Because everybody who works hard deserves more than fries, she said instead. And because that burger's going in the trash in 7 minutes either way. He picked up the burger. His hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you," he said. The words were thick, weighted with more than gratitude. "Enjoy," Nia said. "I'll check back in a bit." She walked away before the moment could get heavier, before either of them could acknowledge what had just happened, that small transaction of human decency that shouldn't have been radical, but was. From his position near the host stand, Gavin watched the whole thing. She saw him watching, saw the way his expression shifted from surprise to calculation to cold fury. He pulled out his phone, typed something, then made his way toward the POS terminal where Nia would have to return to cash out her tables. Nia finished her rounds, check dropped at 7, drinks refilled at the agent's table, the regular sandwich delivered with extra pickles like always. The whole time, she felt Gavin's attention on her like a weight. When she finally approached the POS terminal to run credit cards, Gavin was waiting. "Having a good night?" he asked. His voice was pleasant, His eyes were not. Fine, Nia said. Get that mistake from the kitchen sorted out? Yeah, all handled. Good, good. He leaned against the terminal, blocking her access to it. So here's the thing, Nia. I've been thinking about what we talked about earlier, about maintaining standards, about teamwork, about following the chain of command. Nia said nothing, just waited. And I realized I might have been unclear, Gavin continued. So let me be very clear now. That burger you just gave away, that mistake from the kitchen, that's $12, plus the $7 for the fries. $19 total. That's coming out of your tips tonight. The burger was waste, Nia said. Carlos doesn't make policy decisions. I do. And I'm telling you that burger was not waste. That burger was inventory that you gave away without authorization. $19, Nia, and you're still cut early. Clock out after you finish table 7. The real estate agents were still on their second round. Table 7 would take another 20 minutes at least. Getting cut early meant losing an hour, maybe 90 minutes of prime dinner rush. Gavin, come on. I've got a kid. I need these hours. Then maybe you should think about that before you decide to run your own charity operation on my floor. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. We all make choices, Nia. This was yours. He moved away from the terminal, giving her access. She stood there for a moment, the weight of $19 settling over her like a coat she couldn't take off. $19. 2 hours of lost time. And a man at the bar eating a burger like it was the first real meal he'd had in days. She ran her credit cards, finished her shift. The man at the bar left while she was in the back getting her things, gone before she could even check if he'd finished eating. She hoped he had. She hoped it helped. When Tommy handed out the cash tips at the end of the night, what little wasn't paid on cards, Nia counted hers twice. $53 for 5 hours of work. Before Gavin took his cut, it would have been $72. She didn't complain, didn't protest, just folded the bills carefully and put them in her apron, where they joined the small envelope she carried everywhere, the one with Mason's College Fund, written in her careful handwriting on the front. Inside that envelope were scraps, receipts, napkins, corners of order tickets. Each one recorded a date, what she'd earned from her tables, and what she'd actually been given after tip pool. The math never quite added up right. It never had. But jobs were hard to find, and rent was due, and Mason needed his inhaler refilled next week. So Nia added tonight's slip to the collection, recorded the $19 that had vanished into policy and punishment, folded the envelope back into her apron, and went home to her son, where she would smile and say work was fine, everything was fine, they were fine, because that's what you did when the alternative was admitting the system was rigged and you couldn't afford to fight it. The man at the bar wasn't done, though. She didn't know it yet, but he'd stayed in the parking lot for 2 hours after he left. He'd watched through the windows. He'd seen Gavin at the terminal, seen the conversation that left Nia's shoulders tight and her face carefully blank. He'd watched the whole dinner rush, the way Gavin moved through the room like a lord surveying his domain, the way the staff scattered when he approached. And when everyone left and the restaurant was locked up for the night, he'd sat in his truck, not a beat-up construction vehicle, but a new Ford F-150 that cost more than Nia made in a year, and he'd pulled out his phone. He'd made a call. A long one. Then he'd driven home to his house in Beacon Hill, the one with the view of the Charles River, and he'd pulled up security footage from the restaurant's cloud storage, because Damien Locke owned Harborside Tavern, had owned it for 6 months since his father died and left him a portfolio of restaurants and bars across Boston that Damien barely paid attention to because he was busy running 3 other businesses. He'd gone undercover because of an email, an anonymous message from a dead account that had been scheduled to send automatically if certain conditions weren't met, his father's fail-safe against the exact kind of slow corruption that ate businesses from the inside. The email had said, "Check tip pooling at Harborside. It's been wrong for years. Someone is stealing from your people." So Damien had put on his oldest clothes, scuffed up some boots he'd bought at Goodwill, and walked into his own restaurant to see what happened when nobody knew who he was. Now, at 2 a.m, he sat in his home office and watched security footage from every angle. He watched Gavin count tips at the end of the night, watched him separate cash into piles, do the mental math that was supposed to be pooled and distributed based on hours worked and tables served. watched him create envelopes for each server, and he watched Gavin's hands. Watched them move with practiced efficiency, folding bills, counting twice, making everything look legitimate. But he also watched Gavin's left hand, the one that stayed in his pocket. Watched how it emerged with bills already palmed. Watched how those bills got added to his own envelope while he used his right hand to make the whole thing look like accounting. Damien scrolled back through the footage. Not just tonight. 2 weeks. A month. 3 months. The same pattern. Over and over. Gavin counting, Gavin stealing, Gavin distributing what was left. Small amounts each time. 20 here, 40 there. Never enough to be obvious. Always enough to add up. He did the math. Conservative estimates put it at $15,000 over the past year alone. $15,000 stolen from people like Nia. People who couldn't afford to lose $20, let alone hundreds. People who needed every tip to make rent, to buy medicine, to fund those careful envelopes labeled with dreams like college fund. Damien opened a new document and started taking notes. Timestamps, amounts, pattern analysis. He built a case the way he'd built businesses. Methodically, thoroughly, with attention to every detail. By the time the sun came up, he had everything he needed. He made one more call. To his lawyer. "I need you to draft termination papers," he said, "and I need you to calculate back pay with interest for tip theft. I'm going to need documentation that will hold up if anyone decides to sue, either the terminated employee or the ones who got robbed." His lawyer asked the obvious questions. Damien answered them all. Then he sent one more email, this one to the Harborside Management Group chat. Mandatory staff meeting Monday morning, 9 a.m. Everyone required to attend, no exceptions. Paid meeting, don't be late. He didn't explain why, didn't hint at what was coming. He just set the trap and waited. At her apartment in Dorchester, Nia woke up to her phone buzzing. The management group chat. She read the message with a familiar sense of dread. Mandatory meetings were never good news. They meant policy changes, more rules, more ways to make an impossible job harder. She texted back a thumbs up emoji because that's what you did, and started getting Mason ready for his Saturday morning soccer practice. She didn't know that in 3 days, everything would change. She didn't know that the battered envelope in her apron would become evidence. She didn't know that the man she'd given a burger to was about to burn down the system that had been stealing from her for years. She just knew she had to survive until Monday. Keep her head down. Make enough in tips to cover the $19 Gavin had taken and the late fee on rent and Mason's inhaler refill. 3 more days. She could make it 3 more days. At Harborside, in the office where Gavin would arrive Monday morning expecting another normal week of stealing from his staff with impunity, Damien Locke was already planning the most important performance of his career. Not the kind where you pretended to be poor, the kind where you stopped pretending the system wasn't broken, the kind where you held up a mirror and made people see what they'd been doing to each other, the kind where justice wasn't just a word, but a choice you made with evidence and witnesses and the full force of the power you'd never needed until now. 3 more days. Monday morning at 9 a.m. The reckoning was coming. The weekend crawled by with the particular slowness that comes when you're dreading something you can't name. Nia worked her Saturday shift in a fog of anxiety, every interaction with Gavin feeling like walking on ice that might crack at any moment. He was pleasant, too pleasant, smiling when he passed her in the kitchen, asking how Mason's soccer game went, commenting on how well she was handling her tables. It was the kind of pleasantness that felt like a threat wrapped in courtesy, and it made her skin crawl. Sunday she had off, which should have been a relief, but instead just gave her more time to turn that group chat message over in her mind. Mandatory staff meeting, everyone required to attend, no exceptions. In 5 years at Harborside, there had been exactly 3 mandatory meetings, and each one had ended with someone getting fired or the entire staff getting new rules that made their jobs harder. Once it was a 30-minute lecture about uniform violations. Once it was an announcement that tip pooling was becoming mandatory instead of optional. Once it was Gavin getting promoted from server to floor manager and everyone having to smile and clap while their stomachs turned. She spent Sunday afternoon at the playground with Mason, pushing him on the swings while he chattered about his friend Tyler's new skateboard and the fact that his class was doing a project on the solar system and he wanted to build Saturn because it had the coolest rings. She listened and made the right sounds and felt the weight of that envelope in her bag, heavier now with Thursday night's edition, another scrap of paper documenting another theft too small to fight. "Mom, are you listening?" Mason asked, and she realized she'd lost track of what he was saying. "Sorry, baby. Say it again." "I asked if we could get poster board at Target for my planet project. Mrs. Henderson said we need to present next Friday." Nia did the math in her head. Poster board was $3. Markers, if his were dried out, another $5. Paint maybe, if she had a coupon. She had $47 in her checking account until Friday's direct deposit, and rent was due Wednesday. The overdraft fee was $35 if she went negative. "We'll go Thursday after I get paid," she said. "That work?" Mason's face fell slightly. The particular disappointment of a kid learning that later usually means maybe, but he recovered fast. He was 8, and he'd already learned more about money than any kid should have to. "That's okay," he said. "Tyler said I could borrow his markers anyway." Nia pushed him higher on the swing and swallowed the taste of failure that came with every small thing she couldn't immediately provide. She worked 50-hour weeks and her son was borrowing markers. The math of that didn't add up, but then again, the math never did. That night, after Mason was asleep, she pulled out the envelope. She'd been keeping it for almost a year now, started it after a particularly bad week when her tip seemed impossibly low compared to what she'd earned. At first, it was just curiosity, just a way to track whether her memory was faulty or if something was genuinely wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. Week after week, the totals were off. Not wildly, Gavin was too smart for that, but consistently. $20 here, $35 there. Once, after a particularly busy Saturday night when she'd served a party of 12 who'd left cash, $60 had simply vanished into the gap between what she'd counted and what she'd received. She'd tried to bring it up once, carefully, asking Tommy if the tip pool calculations were available for servers to see. Tommy had looked at her like she'd suggested they unionize and said that Gavin handled all of that. It was management's responsibility, and servers just had to trust the system. When she'd pushed slightly, just asked if there was a formula, something she could use to verify, Tommy had gotten nervous and said he didn't want to get involved in anything that might seem like she was accusing people of something. So she'd started documenting instead. Every shift, every table, every tip. She wrote them on whatever was handy, receipts, napkin corners, the backs of old order tickets. She noted the date, what she'd earned according to her own count, and what she'd received in the envelope at the end of the night. She kept everything in the college fund envelope because it was the one thing she carried everywhere, the one thing she protected. Now she had almost 50 scraps of paper, almost 50 data points, almost 50 pieces of evidence that something was rotten. But evidence of what exactly? That the system was unfair. She already knew that. That Gavin was stealing? She suspected, but suspicion wasn't proof. And proof required a level of access she'd never have. That she was being targeted specifically? Maybe, but also maybe not. Maybe this was happening to everyone, and everyone was just as afraid to speak up as she was. The envelope sat in her lap, heavy with questions she couldn't answer and couldn't afford to ask. She tucked it back into her bag and went to bed, where she didn't sleep so much as exist in the dark, waiting for Monday. Monday morning came with the kind of gray rain that made Boston look like a bruise. Nia dropped Mason at school early. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had agreed to pick him up and watch him until Nia got off work, and caught the bus to Harborside. The meeting was at 9, and she arrived at 8:45 to find half the staff already there, clustering in small groups with the nervous energy of people waiting for bad news. Tommy was there, looking young and scared. Carlos stood near the kitchen door, arms crossed, face unreadable. The other servers, Becca, who was 22 and in grad school, Marcus, who worked nights and weekends while teaching high school during the week, Jennifer, who'd been at Harborside longer than anyone and moved through life with the exhausted cynicism of someone who'd seen every variation of this particular show. They all stood in their own territories, not quite looking at each other. Gavin arrived at 8:55, exactly late enough to make an entrance, but not late enough to seem disorganized. He wore a charcoal suit instead of his usual manager's uniform, and his hair was styled with extra care. He looked like a man preparing for something important. "Morning, everyone," he said, his voice carrying that particular false warmth that managers use when they're about to make your life harder and want you to smile about it. Thanks for being on time. We're just waiting for one more person, then we'll get started. One more person. Nia's stomach dropped. Someone was getting fired. That's what this was. Mandatory meeting so everyone could watch someone get escorted out, a warning to the rest of them about what happened when you stepped out of line. Her mind raced through her last week, the burger, the $19, her quiet defiance. Was she the example? Was that why Gavin was dressed up? The door opened at exactly 9 a.m. The man who walked in wore a suit that probably cost more than Nia made in 2 months. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a white shirt and a tie that managed to look both expensive and understated. His shoes were leather and polished to a mirror shine. His face was clean-shaven, his hair professionally cut, his whole presentation screaming money and authority and power. It took Nia a full 3 seconds to recognize him. The work boots were gone. The canvas jacket was gone. The exhaustion in his eyes had been replaced by something sharp and focused and absolutely in control. But the face was the same. The patient brown eyes were the same. The set of his jaw when he'd said, "I work construction," was the same. The man from Thursday night stood at the front of the room, and the air pressure changed. Gavin's expression flickered. Confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been panic before his professional mask slammed back into place. "Can I help you?" Gavin asked, and his voice was just slightly too tight, just slightly off. "You already did," the man said. His voice was different now, not rough like sandpaper, but smooth and confident and carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Thursday night, you helped me understand exactly what kind of operation you're running here. I appreciate the education." He walked to the small podium Gavin had set up, walked past Gavin like he was furniture, and set a laptop on it. Behind him, 2 other people entered. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a briefcase, and a younger man with glasses carrying a stack of folders. "For those of you who don't know me," the man said, and Nia watched Gavin's face turn the color of old paper. "My name is Damien Locke. I own Harborside Tavern. I've owned it for 6 months since my father passed away and left me his restaurant portfolio. I've been a largely absent owner, I'll admit, too busy with my other businesses to pay attention to the day-to-day operations here. That was a mistake. But I'm here now, and we need to have a conversation about what's been happening in my absence." The room was so quiet Nia could hear the rain against the windows. No one moved. No one breathed. Damien, because that's who he was, that's who he'd been all along, opened the laptop and turned it so the screen faced the room. "Thursday night, I came in for a meal. I dressed like I'd just finished a construction shift because I wanted to see how my staff treated someone who looked like they didn't have much money. I wanted to see if the anonymous complaint I'd received about discrimination and tip theft had any merit. Let me show you what I found." He pressed a key. The laptop screen came to life, and suddenly everyone was watching security footage from Thursday night. Silent video, multiple camera angles showing the interior of Harborside from above. There was Damien walking in. There was Gavin approaching. The video had no sound, but you could see the body language. Gavin aggressive, Damien still. Gavin gesturing toward the door. Damien saying something. The other customers watching. Then Nia appeared in the frame, walking across the floor, stepping between them. The conversation that followed, Nia taking the order, Gavin grabbing her elbow, both of them disappearing into the kitchen. Damien paused the video. "Gavin told me this was a respectable establishment, that I'd be more comfortable at a diner in Dorchester, that they reserved the right to refuse service to anyone." He looked directly at Gavin. "What you didn't know is that I had been monitoring operations for 3 days, watching footage, reviewing complaints. What you also didn't know is that I am the anyone in right to refuse service. I'm the owner. You refused service to me in my own restaurant because I looked poor." Gavin's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I didn't know. I mean, if I had known, if you had known I was the owner, you would have been professional. I understand. That's actually the problem, Gavin. The fact that your professionalism depends on whether someone looks like they have money. But let's continue." He pressed play again. The video showed Nia bringing out the plate with the burger and fries. Showed her setting it down, having a conversation. showed Damien looking at the food like it might save his life. "This woman," Damien said, and Nia felt every eye in the room swing to her. Saw her manager humiliate a customer, saw that customer get denied service for looking poor, and she made a choice. She chose kindness over policy. She took my order. She talked the kitchen into accidentally making me a burger so I could eat something more substantial than $7 fries. She did this knowing it would cost her." He fast-forwarded through the footage. Now it showed Gavin cornering Nia at the POS terminal. Showed a conversation that went on for several minutes. Showed Nia's shoulders get tight. Showed her face go carefully blank. "What you're watching here," Damien said, "is Gavin telling Nia that the burger and fries are coming out of her tips. $19. He also cut her shift short as punishment for undermining him. So let's be clear about what happened Thursday night. A staff member showed humanity and generosity to a customer who appeared to need it. Her manager punished her financially for that humanity. If that's the culture here, we have a serious problem." Gavin found his voice. "With all due respect, Mr. Locke, there are policies, there are standards. I was trying to maintain—" "You were trying to humiliate someone you deemed beneath you," Damien cut him off. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. "You were exercising power for the sake of power, and that's concerning, but it's not why I called this meeting." He closed the footage window and opened another. This one showed Harborside from the end of the night. The lights were lower. The dining room was empty. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. "This is Thursday night after closing. I want everyone to watch carefully." The footage showed Gavin at the bar with a cash box and several envelopes. Tommy was nearby, cleaning glasses. Marcus was visible in the background, wiping down tables. The angle was from the security camera mounted above the bar, a perfect bird's-eye view of everything Gavin was doing. Gavin counted money. Bills into piles. 1 pile, 2 piles, 3 piles, 4. He moved with practiced efficiency, his hands quick and sure. He consulted something on his phone, probably calculating shares based on hours worked. He started filling envelopes. Tommy's envelope, Becca's envelope, Marcus's envelope, Nia's envelope, Jennifer's envelope, each one getting its share of the tip pool according to whatever formula Gavin was using. But Damien paused the video and zoomed in on Gavin's hands. "Watch his left hand," Damien said, "the one that keeps going to his pocket." He played it frame by frame. Gavin's right hand counted bills into Tommy's envelope. His left hand went into his pocket, came out with bills already palmed, went to his own envelope. The bills from his pocket disappeared into his envelope while his right hand made everything look legitimate. Now watch him do it again. Becca's envelope got counted out. Left hand to pocket. Bills palmed. Bills to Gavin's envelope. Marcus's envelope. Same pattern. Nia's envelope. And you could see Gavin count out less than he'd put in the others, probably accounting for the $19 deduction, and then the left hand, the pocket, the palmed bills joining the others in his personal take. Damien let the footage play in real time now. Gavin finished counting. He sealed the envelopes. He called Tommy over and handed them out, Tommy taking his and Becca's and Marcus's to distribute, Gavin pocketing his own envelope. The whole transaction taking maybe 5 minutes. "That was Thursday night," Damien said. "He stole approximately $75 from the staff that night. Now, let me show you Wednesday." He opened another video file. Same scene, same bar. Same Gavin counting money with the same practiced efficiency and the same left hand going to his pocket with the same palmed bills. And Tuesday, another file. Same pattern. And Monday, and last Friday, and the Thursday before that. He pulled up a spreadsheet, numbers in neat columns, dates, amounts, conservative estimates of how much had been stolen each night based on video analysis, and reported tip totals from the credit card system. "I've reviewed 3 months of footage," Damien said. "I've documented 67 separate instances of tip theft. Conservative estimates put the total at approximately $15,000 stolen from you, from your tip pool, from your labor." The room erupted. Not with noise, but with something worse, with sharp intakes of breath, with hands going to mouths, with Tommy saying, "Oh my God," under his breath, with Jennifer starting to cry, with Marcus's face going hard and furious. Nia felt the floor tilt beneath her. $15,000. 67 instances. 3 months of footage. How long had it been going on before that? That's not. I didn't. Gavin's voice was desperate now, the professional polish cracking. You can't. Those videos are out of context. I was just. You were stealing, Damien said flatly. You were stealing from people who depend on those tips to survive. People who work 50-hour weeks and still have to choose between groceries and medicine. People who trust that when they earn money, they'll receive money. You violated that trust. Repeatedly. Systematically. For personal gain. I want a lawyer, Gavin said. You can't accuse me without... You're absolutely right. You should have a lawyer. In fact, I recommend you get one. Damien gestured to the woman with the briefcase. This is Margaret Chen, my attorney. She's prepared documentation of everything I just showed you. She's also prepared your termination papers. You're fired, Gavin. Effective immediately. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the premises. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings from your office. Anything you leave will be inventoried and mailed to your address on file. You can't do this, Gavin said. His face had gone from pale to flushed, his voice rising. I'll sue. I'll take you for everything. You can't just... I can, Damien said. And I am. You stole from your staff. You created a hostile work environment. You discriminated against customers based on appearance. You punished an employee for showing basic human decency. That's 4 separate causes for termination under your employment contract, which I've had my lawyer review very carefully. You're welcome to sue. My attorney will be delighted to present this evidence in court along with testimony from every employee you stole from. The door opened. 2 security guards in uniform entered. They weren't aggressive, but they weren't friendly either. They were professional weight, professional consequence made visible. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Rios to his office and then to his vehicle. Make sure he takes only personal items. Gavin looked around the room like he was searching for allies, for someone to defend him, for any indication that this wasn't really happening. No one moved. No one spoke. They all just watched him with the particular stillness of people who've been victimized and are now seeing justice and aren't quite sure they're allowed to believe it's real. This is bullshit, Gavin said, but his voice had lost its authority. He was just a man now, just someone who'd been caught. You're going to regret this. I regret not catching you sooner, Damien said. Now, please go. The security guards didn't touch him. They didn't have to. They just stood there, patient and immovable, until Gavin walked toward the office. They followed. The door closed behind them. The silence that filled the room felt like pressure, like depth, like diving too far underwater and feeling your ears pop from the weight of everything above you. Damien let it sit for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was gentler now. Tired, maybe. Or sad. I owe all of you an apology, he said. I should have been paying attention. I should have noticed something was wrong. I inherited this place from my father, and I treated it like just another item on a balance sheet instead of a place where people work and depend on fair treatment. That failure is mine. The fact that it took an anonymous email and an undercover visit for me to see what was happening is my fault. I'm sorry. Nobody spoke. The apology hung in the air like something fragile, something none of them quite knew how to hold. Nia felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. Not when she still didn't understand what this meant, what came next, whether this was actually justice or just a different kind of performance. Damien seemed to understand their silence. He nodded, like he'd expected it, and continued. Margaret is going to explain what happens from here. But first, I need to know something. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Has anyone else experienced what I documented? Not just general unfairness, but specific instances where your tips didn't match what you thought you'd earned, where the math didn't add up. The silence stretched. Nia could feel everyone doing the same calculation she was, weighing the risk of speaking against the possibility of being heard. Jobs were precious. Retaliation was real. Even with Gavin gone, even with the owner standing there asking directly, the habit of silence was hard to break. Jennifer spoke first. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it for anything important in a long time. 2 years, she said. I've been keeping track for 2 years, started when my daughter needed braces and I was trying to save and the numbers just never made sense. I thought maybe I was bad at math, maybe I was forgetting tables, but I kept records, every shift, every tip. and it was always off, always less than it should have been. Marcus raised his hand slightly, like he was back in his own classroom. I noticed it about 8 months ago, $50 here, 30 there. I brought it up to Gavin once, asked if I could see the tip pool breakdown. He said it was calculated on a proprietary system, and showing it to staff would compromise the integrity of the process. Those were his exact words. Compromise the integrity of the process. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who'd been told a lie so absurd it circled back to being insulting. I knew something was wrong, Becca said quietly, but I'm in grad school. I need this job. I need the flexible hours. And I thought if I said something, I'd just get cut, get my hours reduced until I had to quit. So I didn't say anything. I just took what I was given and tried not to think about it. Tommy's voice cracked when he spoke. He told me I was part of management, that I had to trust the system because I was representing the system. That questioning it would make me look like I didn't understand how restaurants work. I'm 23. This is my first real job. I thought maybe this was just how it is. Maybe everyone steals a little and you're just supposed to accept it. Damien's jaw tightened. It's not supposed to be like this. It's never supposed to be like this. Margaret? The attorney stepped forward. She had the kind of presence that suggested she'd spent decades making powerful people uncomfortable, and she handled the folder she opened like it contained ammunition. What Mr. Rios did constitutes wage theft under Massachusetts law, she said. Her voice was crisp and professional, each word precisely placed. Tips are considered wages. Stealing them is a criminal offense, not just grounds for termination. However, Mr. Locke has decided to handle this internally rather than pursue criminal charges, on the condition that full restitution is made to all affected employees. She pulled out a stack of papers. We've calculated back pay based on the documented instances we could verify from security footage and credit card records. For the past 3 months, we have exact numbers. For the period before that, we've used statistical modeling based on reported hours worked, average table counts, and the pattern of theft we observed. These are conservative estimates. If you have personal records that suggest you're owed more than what we've calculated, we want to see them. Nia's hand moved to her bag before she could think about it. The envelope. The scraps of paper. The careful documentation of every shift for almost a year. Jennifer was already pulling out a small notebook. I have everything, she said. Every shift since March 2 years ago. Dates, tables served, tips counted, tips received. May I see that? Margaret asked, and Jennifer handed it over like she was giving up something precious. Margaret flipped through it, her expression getting grimmer with each page. This is excellent documentation. This will help us establish a longer pattern. Anyone else? Marcus pulled out his phone. I started taking photos of my table receipts 6 months ago. Every single one. I've got them all backed up to the cloud. Becca had a spreadsheet on her laptop. Tommy had notes in his phone. One by one, they all revealed that they'd been documenting their own exploitation, keeping private records of their own theft, gathering evidence they'd never thought they could use because what was the point when the system protected the thief? Nia pulled out the envelope. Her hand shook slightly as she opened it. The scraps spilled onto the table in front of her. Napkins, receipt paper, torn order tickets, all of them covered in her neat handwriting. Dates, table numbers, amounts earned, amounts received, almost 50 separate entries documenting almost 50 separate thefts. And on the front of the envelope, in her careful script, Mason's College Fund. Margaret picked up the envelope, read the label. Something in her professional expression cracked, just for a moment before she smoothed it back into place. May I? She asked, gesturing to the scraps. Nia nodded. She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up with the weight of finally being seen, finally being believed, finally having someone with power look at her evidence and treat it like it mattered. Margaret spread the scraps across the table, organizing them by date. She cross-referenced them with her own documentation. She made notes. She did calculations. The room watched her work in silence. Finally, she looked up. Based on what I'm seeing here, and cross-referencing with the video evidence and credit card data, I can verify that the theft pattern extends back at least 14 months. Ms. Harper, according to your documentation and our records, you were stolen from approximately 78 times. The total amount, calculating conservatively, is approximately $4,200. The number hit Naya like a physical blow. $4,200. That was 3 months of rent. That was Mason's inhaler refills for 2 years. That was the poster board, and the markers, and the field trip fees, and the new shoes, when his feet grew, and the birthday presents she'd put on credit cards because there was never enough left over after bills. $4,200 stolen from her while she worked double shifts and tried to teach her son that hard work mattered, that honesty mattered, that doing the right thing eventually paid off. Jennifer, Margaret continued, based on your notebook and our verification, approximately $8,700 over 2 years. Marcus, $3,100 over 8 months. Becca, $2,400 over a year. Tommy, $1,800 over 6 months. She kept going. Every person in the room got a number. Every number was a theft. Every theft was a choice someone had made to take from people who already didn't have enough. Mr. Locke has authorized full restitution plus 20% interest to account for the time value of money and the hardship caused by the theft. Checks will be issued today. You'll have them before you leave this meeting. The younger man with glasses came forward with a stack of envelopes. He handed them out one by one, checking names against a list. Each envelope was sealed, professional, containing a check and a detailed breakdown of how the amount had been calculated. Nia opened hers with shaking hands. The check was for $5,400, $4,200 in stolen tips, plus $1,200 in interest. More money than she'd ever held at one time in her entire life. Enough to catch up on rent, enough to refill prescriptions and buy groceries and get Mason new shoes and actually put money in that college fund envelope for real instead of just writing the words on the outside like a prayer. She looked up and found Damien watching her. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Not gratitude exactly, because gratitude implied gift, and this wasn't a gift. This was what she'd earned, what she was owed, was what had been stolen and was now being returned. But there was recognition there, acknowledgement. You saw me when I needed it, and now I see you. Jennifer was crying openly now, clutching her envelope like it might disappear. $8,700, she whispered. My daughter's braces. I had to put them on a payment plan with 20% interest because I couldn't pay up front. I've been paying for 2 years. This would have covered it. This would have... She couldn't finish. Marcus stared at his check like he was waiting for it to turn into something else. I've been working 3 jobs, teaching during the day, here at night, and driving for Uber on weekends. I thought I needed 3 jobs to make ends meet, but I didn't. I just needed one job that didn't steal from me. Becca was laughing and crying at the same time. I can pay my student loan. I can actually make more than the minimum payment. I can actually make progress. Tommy just looked lost, like he'd believed something about how the world worked and was now learning it had been a lie, and he didn't know what else might be false. Damien let them have the moment, let them react, let them feel whatever they needed to feel. Then he spoke again, and his voice carried a different weight now. The checks are just the first step, he said. The money you were owed is being returned, but money doesn't fix culture. It doesn't fix the system that allowed this to happen. So here's what's going to change, effective immediately. Margaret pulled up a document on the laptop and turned it so everyone could see. It was a bulleted list, professionally formatted, the kind of thing that had been drafted by lawyers and reviewed for compliance. First, Damien said, tip pooling is now optional. If you want to pool tips with other staff, you can choose to do so. If you want to keep your individual tips, that's your right. No one will be penalized for either choice. Jennifer raised her hand tentatively. What if we choose not to pool and management decides we're not team players? What if our hours get cut? That brings me to point 2, Damien said. All tip calculations, whether pooled or individual, will be transparent. You'll have access to a system where you can log your tables, your tips, and verify that what you're receiving matches what you earned. No more black box, no more proprietary systems. You'll be able to see exactly how your money is calculated. Point 3. Anonymous reporting. You'll have a direct line to report concerns about management, harassment, discrimination, or anything else that makes you uncomfortable. That line goes directly to me and to HR. Not to your manager, not through a chain of command that might be compromised, directly to the top. Point 4. Retaliation is grounds for immediate termination. If anyone, and I mean anyone, including future managers, punishes you for using the reporting system, for refusing to pool tips, for documenting your earnings, or for any other protected activity, they're fired. No warnings, no second chances. This is a zero-tolerance policy. He paused. Let that sink in. And point 5, regular audits. Every quarter, an independent firm will audit tip distribution, wages, schedules, and workplace practices. They'll interview staff anonymously. They'll review records. They'll make sure what happened under Gavin never happens again. Marcus spoke up. What about a new manager? Who's going to run the floor? I'm promoting from within, Damien said. I need someone who understands what it's like to work here. Someone who's experienced the problems firsthand. Someone who has the trust of the staff and the integrity to do this right. His eyes swept the room and landed on Nia. Ms. Harper, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Every head turned. Nia felt the weight of attention settle on her shoulders like a coat. She stood on legs that didn't quite feel stable and followed Damien to the small office off the main floor, Gavin's office, though presumably not anymore. The door closed behind them. Through the window, Nia could see the rest of the staff talking in low voices, their envelopes clutched like lifelines. I saw what you did Thursday night, Damien said. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, his expression serious but not unkind. You saw someone being humiliated and you stepped in. You chose compassion over self-preservation. You paid a price for that choice. $19 you couldn't afford to lose, hours you needed to work. And you didn't do it for recognition. You did it because it was right. I just gave someone a burger, Nia said. Her voice felt small in the enclosed space. You did more than that. You showed leadership. You showed moral courage. You chose who you wanted to be in a moment when staying silent would have been easier and safer. He picked up the envelope she'd left on the table outside, the one labeled Mason's College Fund. And you documented everything. For almost a year, you kept records even though you had no reason to believe anyone would ever look at them. You gathered evidence even though evidence usually doesn't matter to people without power. That's not just careful. That's strategic. That's smart. He set the envelope down carefully. I need an assistant general manager, someone who can help me rebuild the culture here, someone who understands what the staff needs because they've lived it, someone who won't become what Gavin was. I think that's you. Nia stared at him. I'm a server. I don't have management experience. I don't have a business degree. I have a high school diploma and 8 years of restaurant work and a son who needs me to have a stable job, which means I can't afford to fail at something I'm not qualified for. You're qualified, Damien said simply. You're qualified because you have something that can't be taught in business school. You have empathy. You have integrity. You have the respect of your coworkers. And you have the documentation skills to prove you can think systematically about problems and gather evidence. Those are the qualifications that matter. What if I say no? Then you say no. You keep your serving position. Nothing changes except you get your stolen wages back and you work under a fair system. This is an offer, not a requirement. But I think you'd be good at this. And I think you'd want to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else here. Nia thought about Mason, about the college fund that had been a dream written on an envelope. About the morning she'd explained to him that they couldn't get poster board until Thursday because rent was due. About the way he'd learned to say, that's okay, when what he meant was, I wish things were different. She thought about Jennifer crying over her daughter's braces, about Marcus working 3 jobs, about Tommy being 23 and learning that his first boss had been stealing from him while teaching him that theft was normal. She thought about the feeling of walking across that floor Thursday night to take Damien's order, knowing it would cost her but doing it anyway because some things mattered more than cost. What does assistant general manager pay? She asked. $52,000 salary plus benefits, health insurance that covers dependents, 2 weeks paid vacation to start, and you'll be part of the decision-making process for how this restaurant operates going forward. Your voice will matter. $52,000. Health insurance that covered Mason's asthma, paid vacation, a voice that mattered. She'd been making about $28,000 a year as a server when you averaged out the slow weeks and the good weeks and the times Gavin cut her hours for stepping out of line. $52,000 was almost double. $52,000 was the poster board and the markers and the field trip and the new shoes and the birthday presents and actual money in the college fund and breathing room and safety and the thing she'd been chasing for 8 years without ever catching. "I don't know how to be a manager," she said. "I don't know how to make schedules or handle inventory or deal with customer complaints at that level. I don't know." "I'll teach you," Damien said. "Or rather, I'll hire people to teach you. You'll get training. You'll have support. You won't be thrown in the deep end and expected to swim. But here's what I can't teach, what no training can provide. I can't teach someone to care about their coworkers. I can't teach someone to choose right over easy. I can't teach someone to stand up when standing up costs them. You already know how to do that. The rest is just logistics." Nia looked at the envelope in his hands, looked at the window where her coworkers were still processing the fact that they'd been stolen from and were now being made whole. Looked at Damien, who dressed like he was poor to see how people treated poverty, who'd eaten her burger and said thank you and meant it, who'd spent 3 months reviewing security footage to build a case against someone who was stealing from people who couldn't afford to be stolen from. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I'll do it." Damien smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, made him look like someone who believed things could get better. "Good. Let's tell everyone." They walked back out to the main floor together. The conversation stopped. Everyone looked up, expectant, nervous, still not quite believing this was real. "I've asked Nia Harper to be the new assistant general manager," Damien announced. "She's accepted. She'll be working with me to implement the new policies and make sure this place operates the way it should have been operating all along. She has my full support and my full authority. If she makes a decision, it's as good as me making it. If she tells you something, it carries the same weight as if I said it. She's not just my assistant, she's your advocate. She's here to make sure your voices are heard and your rights are protected." There was a moment of silence. Then Jennifer started clapping. It was slow at first, tentative, like she wasn't sure if this was the kind of thing you applauded. But then Marcus joined in, and Becca, and Tommy, and suddenly the whole room was applauding, and it wasn't polite corporate clapping. It was real. It was for someone who'd been one of them and was now being given power, and they believed she'd use it right. Nia felt her eyes burn again. This time, she let the tears fall. After the applause died down, Margaret distributed more paperwork. The new policies in writing, forms acknowledging receipt of back pay, information about the anonymous reporting system. She explained that they could take as much time as they needed to review everything, that they should feel free to consult with their own attorneys if they wanted, that nothing they signed today waived any rights they might have. But mostly, people just wanted to talk. They clustered in groups, comparing their checks, sharing stories about moments when they'd suspected something was wrong, but talked themselves out of believing it. Jennifer showed Nia her notebook with 2 years of careful documentation. Marcus pulled up his cloud storage with 6 months of receipt photos. They all had evidence. They'd all been gathering proof without coordinating, without knowing anyone else was doing the same thing, each of them alone in their certainty that something was wrong, but lacking the power to do anything about it. Tommy approached Nia hesitantly. "Hey, congratulations. You're going to be great at this." "Thanks," Nia said. "You doing okay?" He shrugged. "I feel stupid, like I should have known, should have seen what was happening." "You're 23. This is your first real job. You trusted the system because why wouldn't you? That's not stupid. That's normal. What was stupid was Gavin taking advantage of that trust." "Yeah, I guess." He looked at his check again. $1,800. That's my rent for 2 months. I was going to have to ask my parents for money again. I'm 23 and I was going to have to ask my parents because I couldn't make ends meet working full time. "You were making ends meet," Nia said. "You were just being robbed at the same time. That's not a failure. That's theft." He nodded, but she could see him processing it, trying to reconcile what he'd believed about himself with this new information. It would take time. It took time to learn that you'd been victimized, and more time to learn that being victimized wasn't the same as being weak. Damien was talking with Jennifer and Marcus, answering questions about the new reporting system. Becca was on her phone, probably telling someone about the check, about the changes. The young man with glasses was collecting signed paperwork and filing it with bureaucratic efficiency. The meeting stretched from 1 hour to two. People needed time, needed space to process, needed to ask questions and express anger and feel relief and grapple with the complicated emotions that come when justice arrives but can't give you back the time you spent struggling. Finally, around noon, Damien called the room to attention one more time. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said. "Take the rest of the day off. Paid. All of you. Go home. Process this. Come back tomorrow ready to build something better. And if anyone has questions or concerns between now and then, you have my number. You have Nia's number. We're here." He paused, looked around the room at the faces of people he'd inherited along with the restaurant, people he'd failed to protect until an anonymous email forced him to pay attention. "Thank you," he said, and his voice carried genuine weight. "Thank you for keeping records. Thank you for not giving up even when the system was rigged against you. Thank you for showing up and doing your jobs with integrity even when your manager had none. You deserved better. You're going to get better, starting now." People filed out slowly, clutching their envelopes, still talking in low voices. Nia stayed behind, watching them go, trying to figure out how she felt about everything that had just happened. Damien approached her. "You okay?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "This is a lot." "It is. And I'm sorry it had to happen this way. I'm sorry you had to document your own theft for a year before anyone listened." "The anonymous email," Nia said. "Who sent it?" Damien pulled out his phone and showed her the message. It was short, clinical, and came from an address that was just random numbers and letters at a free email service. The timestamp showed it had been sent 3 weeks ago, but the metadata suggested it had been scheduled for automatic sending if certain conditions weren't met. "My father set it up," Damien said quietly. "Before he died, he set up fail-safes for all his properties. Automated emails that would trigger if financial patterns suggested theft or if complaints were filed and not addressed. He was sick for 2 years before he passed. He knew he couldn't manage everything himself. He knew people might take advantage, so he built systems to catch them." "He was protecting you," Nia said, "and protecting us." "He was. And I didn't realize it until the email came through. Didn't realize he'd been that careful, that thoughtful, that he'd built in accountability measures even from beyond the grave." Damien's voice went rough. "I miss him, and I wish he was here to see this, to see that his system worked." "He'd be proud," Nia said. "Not just of the system, of you. You could have ignored the email, could have handled this quietly, could have just fired Gavin and covered it up. But you didn't. You did this right." "I did this the only way it could be done," Damien corrected. "Anything less would have been complicity, would have been choosing comfort over justice. My father taught me better than that, and apparently so did you." They stood in the empty restaurant, just the two of them now, surrounded by tables that would soon fill with customers who had no idea what had happened here, what had been exposed and corrected and changed. "When do I start?" Nia asked. "Officially start, I mean." "Today, if you want. Tomorrow, if you need time. Take the afternoon at least. Tell your son. Celebrate. Let yourself feel good about this before the hard work begins." "The hard work?" "Rebuilding culture isn't easy. Changing systems that people are used to isn't easy. Some staff will resist. Some customers will complain. You'll make decisions that upset people. You'll have to fire someone eventually, and it will feel terrible. You'll have to enforce rules you don't entirely agree with. You'll have to balance compassion with accountability, and there won't always be clear answers about which matters more. It's going to be hard. But worth it," Nia said. "But worth it," Damien agreed. "And you won't be alone. I'll be here. Margaret will be available. You'll have resources and support. But yeah, it's going to be hard. I want you to know that going in." Nia thought about Mason, about the way he said, "That's okay," when things weren't okay. About teaching him that hard work mattered, and kindness mattered, and integrity mattered, even when the world seemed designed to punish all three. "Hard is okay," she said. "I know how to do hard. What I don't know how to do is easy." Damien laughed. "Then you're going to be just fine." Nia picked up Mason from school herself that afternoon, something she almost never got to do on a Monday. Usually Mrs. Chen handled pickup while Nia was still at work, still serving tables, still counting tips that never quite added up. But today she stood outside the elementary school gates with the other parents, feeling the November sun on her face and the weight of the check in her purse like it might burn through the leather. Mason came bounding out with his backpack half open and his jacket tied around his waist, even though it was 50 degrees outside. When he saw her, his face lit up with surprise and something else. Concern, maybe, because Mom picking him up during the week usually meant something was wrong. "Hey, baby," she said, catching him in a hug. "How was school?" "Fine. Mrs. Henderson said my solar system project proposal was really creative. I want to make Saturn with actual rings that spin." He pulled back, studying her face. "Why are you here? Did something happen? Are you sick?" 8 years old and already trained to expect crisis. Already learning that deviation from routine meant trouble. Nia felt that familiar ache in her chest, the one that came from knowing your child had learned too young that stability was fragile. "Nothing's wrong," she said, taking his hand as they started walking toward the bus stop. "Actually, something's really right. Something good happened at work today. Really good." Mason's face shifted from worry to cautious optimism. "Good like we can get pizza, or good like you don't have to work a double?" "Good like we can get pizza, and I got a promotion, and we're going to be okay for a while. Really okay." She told him the appropriate version as they rode the bus home, that her boss had noticed she was working really hard and gave her a better job with better pay and better insurance. She left out Gavin and the theft and the security footage and the year of documented exploitation. He was 8. He didn't need to know that the system had been rigged, that his mother had been stolen from while she worked herself to exhaustion. He just needed to know that things were getting better. "So does this mean I can do the science project with the good poster board?" he asked. "The foam core kind that doesn't bend?" "Yeah, baby, the good poster board. And we can get the paint markers too, the ones that don't bleed through." "And the glow-in-the-dark paint for the rings?" "And the glow-in-the-dark paint." Mason threw his arms around her waist right there on the bus, nearly knocking her into the lady sitting across from them. "You're the best mom," he said into her jacket. "Even when we can't afford stuff, you're still the best." Nia held him and felt the tears come again, the third time that day she'd cried. But these were different. These weren't overwhelm or recognition or relief. These were the tears of a parent who'd been trying so hard to protect their child from reality that they'd forgotten what it felt like when reality finally got better. That night, after Mason was asleep with his library book about space still open on his chest, Nia sat at their tiny kitchen table and looked at the check, $5,400. She took out her phone and opened her banking app, set up the mobile deposit, watched the camera capture the image of the check and process it. Funds available immediately. She stared at her account balance. It had been $47 that morning. Now it was $5,447. She paid rent for December, paid the electric bill that was 2 days from being late, transferred $500 to savings, actual savings, not the imaginary kind you tell yourself you'll do when there's money left over. Bought Mason's science project supplies online with overnight shipping because she could, because for once in 8 years she didn't have to make her child wait for something simple. And then she took the envelope, the one labeled Mason's college fund that had been carrying evidence instead of money, and she emptied out all the scraps of paper, every receipt, every napkin, every order ticket. She laid them on the table in neat rows. A year of documentation, a year of proof that she'd been right to trust her instincts. She took a photo of them all together, not for evidence, that was done, that was over. Just to remember, just to have proof that she'd fought back in the only way she could, with careful record-keeping and the stubborn refusal to let theft become invisible just because it was convenient for someone else. Then she threw them all away, put them in the trash where they belonged, where they'd been trying to prove Gavin had been putting her wages all along. The envelope she kept, smoothed it out, wrote a new label in her careful handwriting. Mason's college fund, for real this time. She put $300 in it, cash she withdrew from the ATM on the corner, crisp 20s that felt substantial in her hands. It wasn't enough to pay for college. Wasn't enough to pay for a semester. Probably wasn't enough to pay for textbooks. But it was real. It was a start. It was what she'd been trying to create for a year while Gavin stole from her, and the system protected him, and she kept showing up anyway because what else could you do? Tuesday morning, Nia arrived at Harborside at 8 a.m. wearing the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks she usually saved for funerals and a gray button-down shirt Mason had picked out for her last Christmas. Damien was already there, along with Margaret and a woman Nia didn't recognize, mid-40s, with short dark hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every restaurant crisis possible and wasn't impressed by any of them. Nia, this is Patricia Moreno. She's a restaurant consultant who specializes in culture rehabilitation. She's going to be working with us for the next 3 months to help implement the new systems and train management. Patricia, this is Nia Harper, our new assistant general manager. Patricia extended her hand. Her grip was firm and professional. I've been reviewing the documentation of what happened here. I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm impressed with how you handled it. The records you kept were better than what most forensic accountants produce. I just wrote down what I earned and what I got, Nia said. It seemed important to know. It was important, and it's going to be important going forward. One of the things we're going to implement is radical transparency around wages and tips. You're going to learn how to audit your own books, how to spot patterns of theft or discrimination, how to document everything in ways that protect both you and the staff. Sound good? Nia nodded. It sounded terrifying, actually, but also necessary. Also right. They spent the morning in what Patricia called systems orientation. She walked Nia through the scheduling software, the inventory management system, the POS reports, the credit card processing statements. She showed her how to read patterns in the data, which shifts were busiest, which servers performed best, which menu items had the highest margins. You're going to make decisions based on this data, Patricia explained. Who works which shifts? Who gets training in which areas? When we need more staff and when we can scale back. But data isn't everything. Data doesn't tell you who's struggling at home, who's dealing with a sick parent, who needs Tuesday nights off for their kids' soccer games. That's where judgment comes in. That's where you being one of them matters. I'm not one of them anymore, Nia said quietly. I'm management now. That's different. It is different, but you remember what it was like. You remember what it feels like when management treats you like you're disposable, when they make decisions that prioritize profit over people, when they steal from you and expect you to smile about it. You remember all that. Don't forget it. Don't let this job make you forget what it's like to be powerless. The minute you forget, you become the problem. Damien had been listening from where he stood reviewing supplier contracts. Patricia's right, and that's why I wanted you for this job. Not in spite of the fact that you were a server, but because of it. You have perspective I can't have. I grew up with money. I've never worried about making rent or choosing between medicine and groceries. I can study it, I can understand it intellectually, but I can't feel it. You can. That perspective is worth more than an MBA. Jennifer arrived around 9:30 for her shift, followed by Marcus and Becca. They all looked at Nia with a mixture of respect and uncertainty, happy for her, but also adjusting to the new dynamic. Yesterday, she'd been one of them. Today, she was management. That shift changed things in ways that would take time to navigate. Nia pulled them aside before they started their prep work. Hey, can we talk for a second? They clustered near the bar, that familiar arrangement of people who'd worked together long enough to read each other's moods. I know this is weird, Nia said. I know yesterday I was serving tables next to you, and today I'm technically your boss. And I know that changes things, but I need you to know something. I'm not doing this job to become Gavin. I'm doing it to make sure there's never another Gavin. And I can't do that alone. I need you to tell me when something's wrong, when a policy isn't working, when I'm making a mistake. I need you to push back if I start acting like management instead of like someone who remembers what this job is actually like. Jennifer spoke first. Are you going to make the schedules now? Eventually. Patricia's teaching me how. Why? Because Gavin used to weaponize schedules. You ask for a day off for something important, suddenly you're working all the worst shifts for a month. You question something, your hours get cut. The schedule was how he punished people. Then we need to change that, Nia said. How would you want schedules to work? Marcus jumped in. Posted 2 weeks in advance. If we request time off with notice, it gets approved unless there's a genuine conflict. If there's a conflict, we talk about it instead of just getting denied. And no retaliation. You request Friday night off, you don't suddenly get stuck with Monday lunch for the next month. Okay, let's make that the policy. Jennifer, will you help me write that up? You've been here longest. You know what people need. Jennifer blinked. You want me to help write policy? I want all of you to help. I don't know how to be a good manager yet, but you all know what bad management looks like, so help me not do that. They talked for another 20 minutes, hashing out ideas about schedule requests and shift swaps, and how to handle call-outs and what to do when someone needed to leave early for an emergency. Patricia joined them halfway through, taking notes, asking clarifying questions, helping them think through edge cases and potential problems. By the end, they had the bones of a new scheduling policy that was fair and transparent and gave people agency over their own time. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was better. It was built by the people who'd actually have to live with it. The lunch rush started at 11:30. Nia stood near the host stand with Damien, watching the floor with new eyes. She'd worked these shifts hundreds of times, but she'd always been focused on her own section, her own tables, her own tips. Now she was watching everything. How Jennifer greeted her regulars, how Marcus handled a difficult customer who wanted modifications to every item on the menu, how Becca managed 4 tables at once without looking overwhelmed, how Tommy made conversation with a businessman eating alone at the bar. "What do you see?" Damien asked. "I see people working really hard. I see Jennifer giving her table 12 more attention because they look stressed. I see Marcus de-escalating a complaint before it becomes a problem. I see Becca doing the math in her head about how to time 4 tables so nobody waits too long. I see Tommy making that guy at the bar feel less alone. That's good. That's the right thing to see. Now what don't you see?" Nia scanned the room again. "I don't see anyone checking on them. I don't see support. I don't see someone watching to make sure they're not drowning. When I was on the floor, Gavin only showed up to criticize, never to help, never to just see if we were okay. So what should we do about that? We should check in, not hovering, not micromanaging, just being present, letting them know someone's watching who actually cares if they're struggling. Then let's do that." They moved through the floor separately. Nia stopped by Jennifer's section first. "How you doing? Need anything?" Jennifer looked surprised. "I'm fine. Why?" "Just checking. You've got a full section and table 8 looks like they might be high maintenance." "They are, but I've got it. Thanks for asking, though." Jennifer's expression softened. "Seriously. Thanks." Nia moved to Becca's section next, then Marcus's. Each time, the same question. "How you doing? Need anything?" Each time, the surprise that someone in management was asking without wanting something in return. When she reached Tommy at the bar, he was refilling beers for a group of lawyers having an early lunch meeting. She waited until he had a free moment, then leaned against the bar where customers wouldn't see. "You good?" "Yeah, it's weird, though." "What's weird?" "You asking. I keep waiting for the catch, for you to tell me I'm doing something wrong, or I need to upsell more, or I'm spending too much time talking to customers. There's no catch. I just want to make sure you're okay. This job is hard enough without management making it harder." Tommy's eyes got bright. "I'm still processing yesterday. The money. The stuff about Gavin. Finding out I was right that something was wrong, but also finding out I was being stolen from the whole time. It's a lot." "It is a lot. You need to talk about it? We could grab coffee after shift." "Maybe. Yeah, that would be good. I don't really know how to feel about everything." "However you feel is fine. There's no right way to process this. And Tommy, if something ever feels wrong again, if anyone ever makes you feel like you can't question things, you come to me, directly, immediately. That's what I'm here for." The lunch rush ended around 2. The staff did their side work, rolled silverware, refilled condiments, reset the dining room for dinner service. Nia helped where she could, falling into the familiar rhythm of after-lunch cleanup, even though technically she didn't have to anymore. Marcus noticed. You don't have to do side work now, right? You're management." "I know. But I also know what it's like when management disappears after the rush and leaves you to clean up alone. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to forget what this work actually is." "Gavin never touched a dirty table in his life," Jennifer said from where she was restacking plates. "Made a big deal about how his job was managing, not serving. Like managing was too important to involve actual work." "Managing is work," Patricia said, appearing from the office where she'd been reviewing food costs with Damien. "But it's not more important than the work you do. It's different work. And good managers understand that difference without using it as an excuse to avoid supporting their staff. Nia gets that. That's why she's going to be good at this. That afternoon, after the staff had gone home and before the dinner rush, Damien took Nia into what was now her office, a small room off the kitchen that had been Gavin's domain. It still had his calendar on the wall, his motivational posters about excellence and dedication, his filing cabinet full of documentation that had hidden systematic theft. "We need to clear this out," Damien said. "Make it yours. What do you want in here?" Nia looked around the space. It was impersonal and corporate and designed to project authority without humanity. It was everything Gavin had been. "I want a window," she said. "I want to be able to see the floor. I want to be accessible, not hidden away. We can knock out that wall, put in glass, make it transparent, literally and figuratively. I want a comfortable chair for when staff need to talk. Not a formal desk setup that makes people feel like they're getting called to the principal's office. Something that feels like a conversation, not an interrogation." "Good. What else?" "I want the new policies posted where I can see them. Not on some motivational poster, but actually written out. So when I'm making decisions, I can look at them and remember what we promised, what we're trying to build." Damien made notes on his phone. "This is good. We'll start renovations tomorrow. For tonight, you can use the desk in the back office with me. We need to go over some things anyway." They spent the next 2 hours reviewing the state of Harborside's operations. Damien walked her through the financials, what the restaurant brought in, what it cost to operate, where the margins were tight, and where they could improve. He showed her supplier contracts and explained how to negotiate better prices. He reviewed the staff files, sharing background on everyone's tenure and performance. "Jennifer's been here 6 years," he said. "She's reliable, professional, and she has institutional knowledge we can't afford to lose. But she's also burnt out. She's been dealing with Gavin's abuse longer than anyone. We need to watch for signs that she's checking out emotionally. We need to give her reasons to stay. Marcus is your strongest server on paper, but he's working 3 jobs. That's not sustainable. Eventually, something's going to give. We should think about how to make this job pay enough that he doesn't need the other 2. Becca's in grad school. She's smart and organized, but she's also temporary. Students always are. We invest in her anyway because she's here now and she deserves support. But we don't build critical systems around her availability. Tommy's young and inexperienced, but he's learning fast. He wants to believe in this job. We can either nurture that or break it. Choose carefully." For each person, Damien had observations and context, and a level of attention that Nia hadn't expected. He'd been an absent owner, but he was clearly trying to stop being absent. "You actually care about this place," Nia said. "I didn't. Not enough. I treated it like just another property, another income stream. My father would have been disappointed in that. He built these restaurants because he believed in hospitality, in creating spaces where people felt valued. I inherited the restaurants, but I forgot to inherit the philosophy. I'm trying to fix that." "Why now? Why not 6 months ago when you first took over?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, because the anonymous email forced me to pay attention, because I didn't realize anything was wrong until someone made me look. That's a failure. A serious one. I should have been engaged from the start, should have known my staff, known my operations, known when something was broken. I didn't. And people suffered because of my negligence. But you're fixing it now." "I'm trying to fix it now. There's a difference. Fixing implies completion. We're not even close to done. We've addressed one symptom, Gavin's theft, but that was a symptom of a larger problem, a culture that allowed theft to happen, that made staff feel like they couldn't speak up, that treated people as disposable. That culture doesn't change overnight. It takes time, it takes consistency. It takes proving over and over that things really are different now." The dinner service was busier than lunch. Reservations filled the main dining room, walk-ins clustered at the bar. The kitchen pumped out orders with the rhythmic chaos of a well-practiced machine. Nia moved through the floor in her new capacity, no longer serving, but also not quite sure what she was supposed to be doing. Patricia had told her to observe, to learn the patterns, to start building her instincts for when to intervene and when to let staff handle things. Around 7, a situation developed at table 11. A couple in their 50s, well-dressed and clearly used to being catered to, were unhappy with their entrees. Jennifer was handling it professionally, offering to have the kitchen remake the dishes, but the man was getting loud. His voice carried across the dining room, other customers were starting to look, and Jennifer's professional smile was getting strained. Nia saw it happening and moved without thinking. She arrived at the table just as the man said something about incompetent staff, loud enough to make Jennifer's eyes go bright with held-back tears. "Hi, folks. I'm Nia, the assistant manager. I understand there's a concern with your meals." The man turned his attention to her, and she could see he was the type who enjoyed having an audience for his displeasure. "The salmon is overcooked. The risotto is underseasoned. This is completely unacceptable for what we're paying." "I absolutely understand. I apologize that the food didn't meet your expectations. We can certainly remake both dishes. Our chef takes great pride in getting things right, and I know he'll want to correct this. We don't want them remade, we want them comped, and we want a discount on the rest of the meal." This was the test, the moment where she had to balance customer service with fairness to the house, the moment where she had to decide what kind of manager she was going to be. "I can comp the 2 entrees," Nia said. "That's fair given the issue. The rest of the meal I can't discount, as the appetizers and drinks were served correctly. But I'll also include complimentary dessert to make up for the inconvenience. Does that work?" The man's face suggested it didn't work, that he'd wanted more, that he'd expected complete capitulation. "I want to speak to the owner. The owner trusts me to handle situations like this, and I'm telling you that I can comp the entrees and provide complimentary dessert. If that's not acceptable, I respect your decision, but that's the resolution we can offer tonight." She kept her voice calm, professional, respectful, but firm, not apologetic beyond what was warranted, not willing to be bullied into giving away more than was fair. The man and woman exchanged looks. Nia could see them recalculating, realizing they weren't going to get the complete capitulation they'd wanted. "Fine," the man said, "but we won't be back." I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you'll reconsider in the future. Jennifer will make sure the entrees are comped and dessert is brought out." She walked away before he could continue the negotiation. Jennifer followed her to the POS station, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," Jennifer whispered. "I didn't know what to do. He was getting so loud and I was trying to fix it, but he just kept pushing." "You did everything right," Nia said. "You offered a solution. He wanted to make a scene. That's not on you. Gavin would have given him everything, would have comped the whole meal and given him a gift certificate and then blamed me for the problem. I'm not Gavin, and you didn't cause the problem. Sometimes customers are just looking for a reason to complain. Sometimes people feel powerful by making service workers feel small. You don't deserve that. No one does." Jennifer's eyes welled up. "I've been doing this for 6 years, and nobody's ever said that to me, that I don't deserve to be treated badly. Gavin always made it seem like dealing with abuse was just part of the job. Dealing with difficult customers is part of the job. Dealing with abuse isn't. There's a difference, and I'm going to enforce that difference." The rest of the night went smoothly. The couple at table 11 left without further incident. No tip for Jennifer, but she hadn't expected one. The other tables were pleasant. The kitchen hit its rhythm. The tips were fair. Nia watched it all with new awareness, seeing the small moments of humanity and stress and professionalism that made up a shift. At closing, she helped count tips again. But this time, it was different. This time, she stood next to Tommy and walked through the calculations out loud, showing him exactly how the tip pool was divided if people chose to pool. She showed him the spreadsheet where every tip was logged, every hour tracked, every calculation transparent. "You can audit this any time," she told him. "You can check my math. You can verify that what you're getting matches what you earned. That's your right. And if it ever doesn't match, you come to me immediately. Not next week. Not after you've had time to think about it. Immediately." Tommy nodded, still processing the idea that transparency was normal, that verification was allowed, that questioning management wasn't insubordination. They distributed envelopes. Each person checked their math, verified the totals, and pocketed their money with the visible relief of people who were getting what they'd actually earned. When everyone had left, Nia sat in the dining room with Damien and Patricia doing the end-of-night paperwork. The restaurant was quiet now, just the three of them, and the sound of the kitchen crew finishing their cleaning. "You did good tonight," Patricia said. "The situation at table 11, you handled that exactly right. Firm but fair. Professional without being a pushover." "It felt terrible," Naya admitted. "I wanted to just give him everything so he'd stop being angry, so he'd leave happy." "That's because you're not a monster," Patricia said. "Wanting to de-escalate conflict is normal. Wanting to make people happy is human. But good management means knowing when to hold the line. You can't give away the store every time someone complains. You can't teach staff that if customers yell loud enough, they get whatever they want. That creates bad customers and miserable staff." "Gavin used to comp everything," Damien said. "I've been reviewing the books. He gave away thousands of dollars in free food to customers who complained. Some of them were legitimate complaints. Most of them were people who'd figured out that complaining got them free meals. He was trying to protect his metrics, keep complaint counts low, keep negative reviews minimal. But he was training customers to abuse the system. And staff paid the price." "So we're changing that too," Patricia said. "Reasonable complaints get reasonable solutions. Unreasonable complaints get firm boundaries. Staff deserve to work in an environment where they're not expected to absorb abuse, where management protects them instead of throwing them under the bus to placate angry customers." Nia thought about Jennifer's shaking hands, about the way she'd whispered thank you like she'd never expected someone to stand up for her, about 6 years of working under a manager who'd made her believe that abuse was just the cost of earning wages. "I want to do training," Nia said suddenly, "for all the staff, about what behavior they don't have to tolerate, about when to get management involved, about how to set boundaries with customers without feeling like they're being difficult." "That's a great idea," Patricia said, making notes. "Let's build that into the next quarter's training calendar. You can lead it. You know what it's like. You can teach them from experience." They finished the paperwork around midnight. Damien walked Nia to her bus stop, insisting she shouldn't travel alone that late, even though she'd been doing it for years. "How you feeling?" he asked as they waited under the streetlight. "Terrified. Exhausted. Like I don't know what I'm doing." "That's normal. You're learning a new job. It takes time." "What if I'm bad at it? What if I become Gavin?" "You won't become Gavin. You know why? Because Gavin never asked that question. Gavin never worried about whether he was being fair, never questioned whether his decisions were right, never cared about the impact of his actions. You're asking, you're worrying, you're caring. That means you won't become him." The bus arrived. Nia climbed the steps, showed her pass, found a seat near the back. Through the window, she could see Damien waiting until the bus pulled away, making sure she was safely on her way home. She pulled out her phone and texted Mrs. Chen. "Thanks for watching Mason tonight. I'll pick him up in the morning. How much do I owe you?" The response came immediately. "Nothing tonight. You got that promotion. We're celebrating. I made him dinner, and he did his homework. He's a good boy. You should be proud." Nia stared at the message. All those years of Mrs. Chen watching Mason for whatever Nia could afford to pay, never complaining, never making her feel less than for needing help. All those years of neighbors taking care of neighbors because that's what you did when the system failed you. She typed, "I'm giving you a raise. Real money this time. Weekly rate starting next week, and thank you for everything." "You don't have to do that," Mrs. Chen responded. "I do, and I want to. Let me do this." At home, Mason was asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch, his math workbook still open on the coffee table. Nia picked him up carefully, and he barely stirred as she carried him across the hall to their apartment, tucked him into his bed, kissed his forehead. She looked around their small living space, the water stain on the ceiling from the leak 2 floors up, the thrift store furniture, the single window that faced a brick wall. It was still home. Still enough. But now it was enough with breathing room, enough with safety, enough with the knowledge that tomorrow she'd go back to Harborside not as someone who could be exploited, but as someone who had power to protect others from exploitation. She pulled out the college fund envelope, added another $100 to the $300 already there. $400 that would grow, that would compound, that would eventually become something real because she'd finally climbed high enough to start building instead of just surviving. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Thank you for tonight, for standing up for me. I forgot what that felt like." Another from Tommy. "Today was a good day. I'm glad you're the manager now. Another from Marcus. Same time tomorrow? Another from Becca. You're going to be amazing at this. We're lucky to have you. Nia read them all twice, then saved them in a folder she labeled Remember Why. For the days when management felt hard, when decisions felt impossible, when she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. These messages, these people, this chance to build something better than what had been stolen from all of them. That was why. 3 months passed like a season changing, slowly at first, then all at once, until you looked up one day and realized the landscape had transformed completely. Winter settled over Boston with the kind of cold that made your bones ache, but inside Harborside Tavern, something warmer was taking root. Nia's office had its window now, a glass wall that let her see the entire dining room while staff could see her. She'd furnished it with 2 comfortable chairs instead of a formal desk setup, and the new policies were framed on the wall where she could read them whenever she needed reminding. The motivational posters were gone. In their place hung photos. The staff at their holiday party, Jennifer laughing at something Marcus said, Tommy showing off a complicated cocktail he'd learned to make, Becca on her last day before graduation holding a cake they'd all signed. The changes had been incremental, but persistent. The scheduling system worked exactly as they'd designed it, posted 2 weeks out, time off requests honored, no retaliation. The tip tracking system was transparent and auditable, and every Thursday, Nia posted the weekly breakdown in the break room where everyone could verify their math. The anonymous reporting line went directly to her and Damien, and they'd used it twice, once for a customer who'd made inappropriate comments to Becca, who was immediately banned, and once for a delivery driver who'd been aggressive with kitchen staff, whose company was switched. The quarterly audit had come and gone. The independent firm had interviewed everyone, reviewed all the records, and issued a report that praised the transparency initiatives and recommended minor tweaks to the scheduling software. No red flags. No hidden theft. No culture of fear. Just a restaurant learning to operate the way it should have been all along. But not everything had been smooth. Marcus had quit in January. Not because of anything wrong at Harborside, but because he'd gotten a job at a prep school that paid enough he didn't need 3 jobs anymore. They'd thrown him a goodbye party, and he'd cried and said this place had restored his faith that work could be fair. Jennifer had almost quit twice, old trauma from the Gavin years surfacing in moments of stress, convinced that any mistake would cost her everything. Nia had talked her through it both times, reminded her that one bad night wasn't grounds for termination, that management's job was support, not punishment. They'd hired 3 new servers to replace Marcus and cover increased business. Nia had conducted the interviews herself, with input from the existing staff, and they'd chosen people who needed the job, but also had the temperament for hospitality work. One was a single dad working his way through a career change. One was a woman in her 50s who'd been laid off from an office job and was rebuilding. One was a kid fresh out of high school trying to save money for community college. They all got the same speech on their first day. Transparency, fairness, dignity, and if anything ever felt wrong, speak up immediately. The restaurant was thriving. Revenue was up 18% from the previous quarter. Customer reviews mentioned the improved service, the warmth of the staff, the way the place felt welcoming. What they didn't know was that warmth came from workers who weren't being exploited, who showed up knowing they'd be treated fairly, who served customers with genuine hospitality because they weren't carrying the weight of systematic abuse. On a Tuesday in late February, Damien called Nia into his office. Not her office with the window, but his private one upstairs where he handled the business operations for all his properties. She climbed the stairs with slight trepidation, still not entirely comfortable being summoned by the owner, even though they'd worked closely for months now. He was sitting at his desk with a thick folder open in front of him, and an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sit down," he said, and something in his tone made her stomach drop. "We need to talk." Nia sat in the chair across from him, hands folded in her lap, already running through what she might have done wrong. Had she missed something in the schedule? Made a decision that cost the restaurant money? Failed at some aspect of management she didn't even know she was supposed to be handling? Damien looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "You look terrified. Relax. You're not in trouble. Quite the opposite, actually." The relief was physical. "Then what's this about?" "This," he said, tapping the folder, is a business proposal. I've been reviewing the performance data from Harborside over the past 3 months, comparing it to the same period last year, to the period before my father died, to industry averages. You know what I found? That we're doing better? That we're doing significantly better. Revenue up, costs down, staff retention perfect, customer satisfaction scores through the roof. You want to know why? The new systems? Partially, but mostly you. You rebuilt the culture here. You made people feel valued. You turned this place from somewhere people worked because they had to into somewhere people work because they want to. That's not systems. That's leadership. Nia felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just tried to treat people the way I wanted to be treated, the way Gavin should have been treating us all along. And that simple principle, treating people with basic dignity, transformed this entire operation. Which brings me to my proposal. He pushed the folder across the desk. I own 4 other restaurants besides Harborside. All of them have problems. Not all of them have theft. I've been auditing more carefully now. But they all have culture issues. Disconnected management, high turnover, staff who show up for paychecks but don't care about the work. I need someone who can do what you did here. Someone who can go into these places and rebuild them from the inside. Someone who understands what workers need because they were a worker. Nia opened the folder. Inside was a detailed proposal outlining a new position, Director of Operations and Culture. The salary made her hands shake. $85,000 plus benefits, with performance bonuses tied to staff retention and customer satisfaction across all properties. The job description talked about implementing best practices, conducting culture audits, training management teams, ensuring fair labor practices. You want me to do this at 4 other restaurants? She asked, trying to process the scope. Eventually 5 more beyond those 4, and then possibly beyond my properties. I've been talking to other restaurant owners in Boston, telling them what we did here, showing them the data. They're interested. They want to know how we turned this place around. Some of them want to hire whoever did it to fix their own operations. He leaned forward. You could do this, Nia. You could make this your career, but not just managing one restaurant, but transforming how restaurants operate, making fair treatment the standard instead of the exception. I don't know if I can, Nia said honestly. I barely know how to manage one place. I'm still learning. I still make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them. You do. You've proven that. And you won't be doing this alone. Patricia will continue consulting. I'll provide support. We'll build a team. But I need someone at the center who has moral clarity about what we're trying to achieve. That's you. Nia looked at the salary again. $85,000. More than she'd ever imagined earning. Enough to move out of the apartment with the water-stained ceiling. Enough to put real money in Mason's college fund every month. Enough to stop worrying about whether one emergency would destroy everything she'd built. Can I think about it? She asked. Take all the time you need. But Nia, you've already proven you can do this. Now you just have to decide if you want to. She took the folder home that night, read through every page twice, did math about what this salary would mean for her life. She called her mother in Atlanta, who'd always told her she was settling for too little, who cried when Nia explained what had happened over the past 3 months. She sat with Mason at their kitchen table, their bigger kitchen table now, in the slightly better apartment they'd moved to in January, and explained that Mommy had been offered an even better job, but it would mean more responsibility and less predictable hours. Will you still come to my soccer games? Mason asked, because he was 9 now, and soccer had become important. I'll do my best. I can't promise every game, but I promise I'll try. And I promise that if I take this job, it's because I'm trying to make things better for a lot of people. Not just us. Other families like ours. Other kids whose parents work really hard and deserve to be treated fairly. Mason thought about this with the seriousness of a child who'd already learned that sometimes good things came with complicated trade-offs. If you're helping other people like you help the people at your restaurant, then you should do it. That's what heroes do. I'm not a hero, baby. You are to me. That decided it. She told Damien yes the next morning, and they spent 2 weeks transitioning her responsibilities at Harborside. Jennifer was promoted to floor manager, a decision that made her cry again, but happy tears this time. Tommy became assistant manager, learning the systems Nia had built. Patricia stayed on to support them through the transition, and Nia started visiting the other properties, conducting culture audits, sitting with staff and asking what was wrong, documenting everything just like she'd learned to do. The problems varied by location. One place had a chef who screamed at kitchen staff. Another had a manager who played favorites with scheduling. Another had a toxic culture where servers competed viciously instead of collaborating. But the solutions were surprisingly consistent: transparency, accountability, dignity, and leadership that actually cared about the people doing the work. In March, something unexpected happened. Nia got an email from an address she didn't recognize with a subject line that read, "Thank you." She almost deleted it as spam, but something made her open it. The message was short. "My father built systems to protect people even after he was gone. You're continuing that work. He would have been proud." "I know I am." Sarah Locke. Nia stared at the name. Sarah Locke. Damien's sister, who'd been mentioned once in passing as someone who didn't want to be involved in the restaurant business. She replied, "Thank you for this message. Your father's systems saved a lot of people, including me. I'm honored to carry on his philosophy." Sarah's response came an hour later. "He always said the measure of a business wasn't profit, but whether people went home with dignity intact. You're measuring right." That email went into the Remember Why folder on her phone, alongside the texts from that first night 3 months ago when everything changed. By April, Mason's science fair project on Saturn, complete with motorized rings and glow-in-the-dark paint, had won second place in his grade level. He came home with a ribbon and a certificate, and the kind of pride that comes from doing something well because you had the resources to do it right. Nia hung the certificate on the refrigerator next to the photo from her promotion party at Harborside, where she stood surrounded by people who'd become more than co-workers, who'd become proof that systems could change when people decided to care. The college fund envelope had $1,500 in it now. Real money, growing money. Still not enough for college, but enough to prove that impossible things could become possible if you just kept showing up and doing the work and refusing to accept that exploitation was inevitable. In May, Nia conducted her first major training session for management across all of Damien's properties. 23 managers gathered in a conference room, and she taught them what she'd learned: how to read the signs of cultural rot, how to build transparent systems, how to balance accountability with compassion, how to protect staff from abuse without protecting them from consequences, how to treat people like human beings instead of disposable resources. One manager, a woman in her 40s who'd been running a restaurant in Cambridge for 12 years, raised her hand and asked, "How do we do all this and still hit our numbers? How do we make profit and fairness coexist?" Nia pulled up the data from Harborside: revenue graphs, retention rates, customer satisfaction scores, cost analysis. "You don't choose between profit and fairness," she said. "Fair treatment produces better profit. Happy staff provide better service. Better service creates loyal customers. Loyal customers spend more and return more often. And low turnover means lower training costs, fewer mistakes, and institutional knowledge that compounds over time. Exploitation might produce short-term profit, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, you burn through your workforce and develop a reputation that makes hiring difficult. Fairness is better business. The data proves it." Another manager asked, "What about staff who take advantage? Who use the transparent systems to slack off or game the system?" Then you address it with documentation and clear consequences. Fairness doesn't mean no accountability. It means accountability applies equally and transparently. If someone's not pulling their weight, you document it, discuss it, and if it doesn't improve, you terminate them. But you do it fairly. You don't play favorites. You don't punish people for speaking up. You don't retaliate for protected activities. You just hold everyone to the same standard. The questions kept coming. She answered them all, drawing on 3 months of experience rebuilding one restaurant and 6 weeks of analyzing 4 others. She wasn't an expert. She didn't have an MBA or decades of industry experience. But she had something more valuable. She'd lived on both sides. She knew what it felt like to be powerless and what it took to use power responsibly. After the training, Damien pulled her aside. "That was impressive. You commanded that room. People were listening, taking notes, believing that change was possible because you've proven it's possible." "I just told them what worked at Harborside." "You did more than that. You gave them a framework for thinking about their operations differently. You challenged assumptions. You made them question whether the way they've always done things is actually the right way. He paused. I've been getting calls from other restaurant owners. They want to hire you for consulting work. They want you to audit their operations and teach them what you taught my managers today. I work for you. You do. But I'm not going to hold you back from something bigger. If you want to do independent consulting on the side, I'll support it. If you want to eventually start your own firm teaching other businesses how to operate ethically, I'll be your first reference. This thing you're doing, it matters. It matters beyond my restaurants, beyond any one company. You're creating a model for how to treat workers with dignity while still running profitable operations. That should scale. That should spread. Nia thought about that conversation for days. About the possibility that what had started with a burger given to a stranger in work boots could become something larger, a career, a mission, a way to ensure that other people didn't have to document their own exploitation in college fund envelopes because the system finally worked the way it was supposed to. In June, Mason finished third grade at the top of his class. His teacher wrote on his report card, "Mason is a thoughtful student who works hard and treats his classmates with kindness. He has a bright future." Nia read that comment 3 times, thinking about how children learned values not from what you told them, but from what you showed them. She'd shown Mason that you fight for what's right, even when it costs you, that you document the truth even when you can't use it yet, that you choose kindness even when the system punishes kindness. And somehow, despite everything, he'd learned that the world could be better if people just decided to make it better. On the 1-year anniversary of the night she'd given Damien that burger, though she didn't realize it was the anniversary until Damien mentioned it, they held a celebration at Harborside. The entire staff was there, including Marcus, who came back to visit, and the new hires who'd only heard the story secondhand. Patricia was there. Margaret, the attorney, was there. Sarah Locke, who Nia had met exactly twice, made a surprise appearance. Damien stood at the center of the room and told the story from his perspective, walking in wearing work boots and a battered jacket, watching Gavin try to humiliate him, seeing Nia choose to act when action had a cost. He talked about the burger she'd given him, the way she'd framed it as him doing her a favor by eating food that would otherwise be waste. He talked about spending the night in the parking lot watching her get punished for showing compassion. That night changed everything, he said. Not because I saw theft, though I did, but because I saw what real leadership looked like. I saw someone choose right over safe. I saw someone protect a stranger's dignity at personal cost. And I realized that if this restaurant was going to be worthy of my father's legacy, it needed to be led by people who understood that humans matter more than policy. That compassion isn't weakness, that transparency and fairness aren't obstacles to profit. They're the foundation of sustainable success. He raised his glass. To Nia, who taught me that the measure of a business isn't profit, but whether people go home with their dignity intact. Everyone raised their glasses. Nia felt tears streaming down her face again, the 400th time she'd cried since this whole thing started. But these were good tears, grateful tears, the tears of someone who'd been broken by an unjust system and then given the power to fix that system, not just for herself, but for everyone who came after. Jennifer approached her after the toast, holding something in her hands. "We got you something. All of us. It's not much, but we wanted you to have it." She handed Nia a frame. Inside was a photo of the staff gathered around a table, and beneath it, written in careful calligraphy, was a quote. "Everyone gets the best table, the same respect, the same humanity. No exceptions." "That's what you taught us," Jennifer said. "That's what you teach everyone at every restaurant you visit now. We wanted to make sure you remembered where it started. Here, with us. With you deciding that someone in work boots deserved the same dignity as someone in a suit." Nia couldn't speak, just hugged Jennifer, then Tommy, then all of them one by one. These people who'd been strangers a year ago, who'd been fellow victims of the same theft, who'd become colleagues, then friends, then proof that systems could change when people decided to care enough to change them. Later, when most people had gone home and only a few remained cleaning up, Damien pulled Nia aside one more time. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, "about that anonymous email, the one my father supposedly sent." "Supposedly?" "I've been digging into it, the technical details. My father did set up fail-safes, like I said, but this particular email, it wasn't automated, it was sent manually, by someone who had access to his old account, someone who knew what was happening here and wanted it exposed but couldn't expose it themselves without risking their job. Nia's stomach tightened. Who? I don't know for certain. The account routing makes it hard to trace, but I have suspicions, and I think you might too. Nia thought about who would have known about the tip theft. Who would have had access to Damien's father's old email account? Who would have been protecting themselves while trying to protect others? Who would have risked everything to send that email knowing it might lead nowhere? Does it matter? She asked finally, knowing who sent it? Maybe not. The important thing is that someone cared enough to try. Someone saw what was wrong and found a way to report it anonymously because the system didn't protect people who spoke up. That's on me. That's on the culture we allowed to exist. And it's why the work you're doing now matters so much. Building systems where people can report problems without fear, where speaking truth doesn't cost you everything. They stood in the empty restaurant, surrounded by tables and chairs, and the physical space where so much had changed, where Gavin had tried to humiliate a man in work boots, where Nia had chosen compassion, where justice had finally arrived, slow and thorough and transformative. I need to tell you something too, Nia said. I've been offered a position. Consulting firm in New York wants to hire me to help restaurants nationwide implement fair labor practices. Big salary. National reach. Real power to create change at scale. She watched Damien process this, watched him calculate what losing her would mean for his operations, his properties, his mission to honor his father's legacy by treating workers with dignity. Are you going to take it? He asked. I don't know. It would mean leaving Boston, leaving Mason's school, his soccer team, his friends. It would mean starting over in a city we don't know. But it would also mean helping hundreds of restaurants instead of just 5, thousands of workers instead of just dozens. Real systemic change. What does Mason think? He said I should do it if it means helping more people, that heroes help people even when it's hard. Damien smiled. Smart kid, takes after his mother. He was quiet for a moment, then said, If you take the New York job, I'll write you the best reference letter you've ever seen. I'll tell them exactly what you did here, exactly how you transformed everything, exactly why you're the person they need. And I'll be grateful forever that you spent this year teaching me how to run my father's business the way he always intended. With dignity, with fairness, with the understanding that profit and humanity aren't opposites, they're partners. But, Nia heard the unspoken word, but if you stay, we could build something even bigger here. Not just fixing my restaurants, fixing the industry in Boston, creating a model that other cities copy, starting a movement, you, me, Patricia, the network we're building. We could make Boston the place where fair labor practices are the standard, where exploitation becomes unacceptable, where every restaurant worker has the protections you helped create. Nia thought about New York, about national reach and big salary and the scale of impact. Then she thought about Harborside, about Jennifer managing the floor with confidence now, about Tommy training new hires with patience and transparency, about Mason playing soccer at the park down the street with kids he'd known since kindergarten. She thought about the college fund envelope, which now held $3,200 because she'd been adding to it every month. Still not enough for college, but enough to prove that impossible things became possible through consistent effort and fair wages and systems that valued human dignity over maximum extraction of profit. She thought about the frame Jennifer had given her, with its quote about everyone getting the same respect, about how that philosophy had started with one burger given to one stranger and had somehow become a mission that was spreading through Boston's restaurant industry, one workplace at a time. I'm staying, she said. New York can build their own model. We're building ours here, and we're going to make it so good, so successful, so obviously right that every other city has to follow our lead or admit they're choosing exploitation over ethics. Damien's face broke into a genuine smile. Then let's get to work. We've got an industry to transform. They shook on it there in the empty restaurant, two people who'd met because one of them was testing his staff's humanity and the other decided to pass that test regardless of cost. Two people who'd learned that systems only seemed unchangeable until someone decided to change them. That exploitation only seemed inevitable until someone built an alternative that actually worked better. That night, Nia went home to Mason and told him they were staying in Boston. They were going to keep building the life they'd started, keep making things better one restaurant at a time, keep proving that fairness and profit could coexist if people just chose to make them coexist. "Are you happy?" Mason asked, because at 9 years old he was learning to read the complexity of adult emotions. "Yeah, baby, I'm happy. Not because everything's perfect, but because we're making it better. And that's enough." She pulled out the college fund envelope one more time, added another $200 from her paycheck. $3,400 now, still not enough for college. But growing, compounding, becoming real through the accumulation of fair wages and transparent systems, and the revolutionary act of treating people with dignity. On the outside of the envelope, beneath the words "Mason's College Fund, for real this time," she added one more line in her careful handwriting. "Built on fairness, grown through kindness, proof that systems can change." She tucked it back in her bag where she carried it everywhere, not as evidence anymore, but as reminder. Reminder of where they'd started, reminder of what was possible, reminder that one night, one burger, one choice to treat a stranger with compassion had transformed into a career, a mission, a movement. Years from now, when Mason used that money to pay for college, she'd tell him the whole story. About the man in work boots who was actually an owner in disguise. About the manager who stole and the system that enabled him. About the documentation she'd kept in this very envelope, gathering evidence of her own exploitation because she'd known in her bones that something was wrong even when everyone told her to accept it. She'd tell him about choosing courage over safety, about speaking truth to power, about building systems that valued people over profit, about how change was possible but never inevitable. It required people deciding that the current system was unacceptable and doing the hard work of building something better. But mostly she'd tell him about the night she gave a stranger a burger and framed it as him doing her a favor, not knowing that small act of humanity would cascade into everything that came after. That kindness, even when it cost her, especially when it cost her, was never wasted, was always worth it, was always the thing that mattered most. She'd tell him, "You matter. Everyone matters." And the minute we forget that, the minute we start treating people as disposable or less than or unworthy of basic dignity, we've lost something essential, something that no amount of profit can ever replace. She'd tell him, "Be the person who gives the burger. Be the person who documents the truth. Be the person who chooses right even when right is expensive. Because that's how systems change. That's how the world gets better. One choice at a time. One act of courage at a time. One refusal to accept exploitation as inevitable." And she'd show him this envelope, worn from years of carrying, marked with additions and crossed out labels, and the evidence of transformation. Proof that sometimes the things you build to survive become the things that help you thrive. That sometimes the evidence you gather in desperation becomes the foundation of justice. That sometimes one night, one choice, one act of compassion changes everything. The college fund was real now. The career was real now. The systems were real now. And it had all started with 5 words that should never have needed saying, but did. Everyone deserves the same respect. That was the truth Nia carried forward into every restaurant she audited, every manager she trained, every system she rebuilt. That was the philosophy she'd inherited from a man she'd fed a burger to, who'd inherited it from his father, who'd built it into automatic systems because he knew humans needed protecting even after he was gone. That was the legacy she was building now, one workplace at a time, one fair wage at a time, one transparent system at a time. And it was enough, not because it was easy, not because it was finished, but because it was right, because it mattered. Because somewhere in Boston, right now, a server was earning fair tips and going home with dignity intact and teaching their kid that hard work paid off when the system was fair. That was worth everything, worth the fear and the risk and the year of documented theft, and the choice to step forward when staying silent was safer. That was the real return on investment, not the money in the envelope, though that mattered too, but the knowledge that systems could change, that fairness could win. That one person choosing courage could start a cascade that transformed everything. Nia Harper had been a server who documented her own exploitation in a college fund envelope. Now she was a director who taught others how to build systems where documentation wasn't necessary because theft wasn't tolerated, where workers were valued, where dignity was standard, where everyone got the best table, the same respect, the same humanity. No exceptions. That was the story. That was the mission. That was the future they were building, one restaurant at a time, in a city that was learning that fairness and profit weren't opposites, but partners in creating something sustainable and just. And it had all started with a burger, a stranger in work boots, and a woman who decided that compassion mattered more than policy. Sometimes that's all it takes. One choice, one moment, one refusal to let cruelty be normal, and everything changes.